Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Friday morning to you, and welcome back to Now TV and Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I'm the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. Really appreciate you being with me. Hope you've had a fantastic week. Here we are, 3 days from Christmas. It's like I've said several times on this program already this year. Where in the world has this year gone? I mean, I just haven't been ready for how quickly this year has flown by in my mind. So, anyway, hope you have a fantastic Christmas holiday. Now, here's the deal. Probably I will not make a new video for the New Year's week. That's the week of my birthday. Yes, I will be turning 49. Yes, that is true. Anyway, 49 plus. Let me just put it like that. And all gifts are greatly appreciated, don't you know? So anyway, probably do a rerun for the week following Christmas. All right, and because I'm going to take off, going to kick back, going to relax, just enjoy family, a little bit of a break, try to let my voice rest just a little bit more, etc. And so then I'll be with you again right after the first of the year. So again, this will serve as my Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you. This will be my last video for the year. All right? So just keep that in mind. And want to get right back into our discussion of the challenge of Christ. I hope I do not have to remind you by this time, but we're always gaining new viewers who do not know what I'm talking about when I talk about the challenge of Christ. So let me very quickly reiterate what the challenge of Christ is. In John chapter 10 and verse 37, Jesus said, "Do not believe me for my words' sake, believe me for my works." What Jesus was saying there is, if he didn't do what he claimed he was going to do, then we're not supposed to believe in him. We apply that, and just last week, I was in a doctor's office. I think it was last week. Anyway, I was in a doctor's office, and he and I were visiting, and I mentioned the challenge of Christ to him. He was not aware of the challenge. Literally not aware of the challenge. And I said, well, let me ask you this question in regard to that challenge, where Jesus said, if I do not do what I say I'm going to do, then don't believe me. I said, we would apply that to his statement concerning his resurrection, right? And he goes, well, yeah. I said, well, let me put it this way. Jesus said, if Christ is not risen, your faith is in vain. If Christ is not risen, we, that is the apostles, are found to be false witnesses. If Christ is not risen, you are yet in your sin. So I said, that's the challenge of Christ, okay? He said he was going to be raised from the dead. If he wasn't raised from the dead, Paul said, our faith is in vain. The apostles are false witnesses, and we're still in our sin. He goes, oh, okay, yeah, of course. I see that. I said, okay. Jesus also said, Son of Man will come in the glory of the Father with his angels and in judgment of every man. And verily I say unto you, there are some standing here which shall not taste of death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. I said, are any of those people still alive? He said, no. I said, then that's the challenge of Christ. And he goes, well, I have to admit, those are some of the passages in the Bible that have bothered me from time to time, because I just simply haven't understood how he could say things like that, and yet I don't know what to think about it. I said, well, the problem of it is most Christians don't think about it. So I said, as you study, and I said, that makes you a step above most Christians in that you study the Bible. You actually try to figure some of this stuff out. Then I said, you need to consider the challenge of Christ. Had a fantastic conversation. I really genuinely believe he's going to give it some serious thought, and we will see what happens. So, once again, ladies and gentlemen, and for those of you who have not been with us from the very beginning, all right, this is the challenge of Christ. It is tremendous. It is a great challenge. And make no mistake about it whatsoever, the Muslims, the Jews, the atheists, agnostics, the skeptics are well aware of Jesus' promise that he was coming back on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory in the first century. They, just like the great majority of Christians, believe that his promise to return was a promise that he was going to come back at the end of human history, the end of the Christian age, put an end to time and space, and depending upon the view, recreate the literal physical heaven and earth. But all of that takes place at the end of time with Jesus descending out of heaven as a 5'5" Jewish man on a literal cumulus cloud, as I often like to say. You and I both know that did not happen in the first century. Atheists and skeptics know it did not happen in the first century. In April of 2023, I had a formal debate with a former Church of Christ minister who had become an atheist because of his traditional view of the coming of the Lord. It did not take place as he imagined it was supposed to, back to the 5'5" Jewish man thing. Therefore, Jesus lied. He failed. That debate did not go well for him. There are now some people who were on the borderline of giving up their faith, who came to realize we can meet the challenge of Christ. Because I met the challenge of Christ in that debate. All right? Now then, with all that said, part of the overall challenge of Christ is the reality of the timing of the parousia, not just the nature that we have, that we've examined in depth over and over. And by the way, I've just got to take notice here. I have a friend. I call him a friend, even though I've never met him face to face. He is a genuine scholar, very, very scholarly guy. Well, recently he wrote an article on the logical fallacies and failures, as he sees it, of full preterism. And he said, well, what has happened is that the figurization, by that he means taking language of the coming of the Lord, judgment, and resurrection, figuratively, non-literally. He says that figurization started because of the disappointment of the great disappointment of the 19th century. William Miller and his prediction that the Lord was going to come in 1844, and then 1845 didn't happen. You have the Jehovah's Witnesses predicting, and of course it was simply called the Millennial Dawn at the time. The Lord was going to come. Millions now living will not die before the coming of the Lord. That was predicted in 1917, 1918, 1919. They even started buying up property in Los Angeles. Did you know that? Jehovah's Millennial Dawn students began buying up property in Los Angeles, around San Francisco as well. You know what that land was for? For Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob to live in. Because he was coming back in 1925. I've got a copy of the book. It's undeniable. So anyway, all of these predictions that failed to come true, Harold Camping that disappointment continues on the part of countless believers today, whose organizations made or their favorite prophecy teachers, such as Hal Lindsey, 1980s, Countdown to Armageddon, 40 years from 1980, we'll see the coming of the Lord. Because after all, Jesus said, this generation will not pass until all these things are fulfilled, and we're that generation. Thomas Ice Tim LaHaye, Charting the End Times, called the restoration of Israel in 1948 the super sign of the end. And that means that 1988 should have seen the coming of the Lord. Kind of funny, they produced that book. If I remember correctly, it was about 2005. I'd have to double check that. Math is wrong. Their prediction was wrong. All because of a confusing, convoluted view of the nature of the coming of the Lord. So, nonetheless, we've been focused on demonstrating the Old Testament foretold the time of the coming of the Lord, the judgment and resurrection. It would be in the last days. Well, most Christians today believe we're in the last days. That's one of the most egregious biblical errors that can be imagined. We are not in the last days. Christian age has no end. So because of the belief that we're in the last days, it's believed that, these Old Testament prophecies and the New Testament prophecies as well, when they predict the coming of the Lord, judgment, and resurrection, they must be talking about, for instance, the last day, which is the time of the resurrection, John 6:39, John 6:44, 45, etc., etc. So since the resurrection is on the last day, and the last day is the last day of the last days, then that must mean it's the last day of the Christian age. That's false. The last day goes all the way back to Daniel and the 1290 days and the 1335 days where Daniel was told in regard to the resurrection, Daniel, seal up the book and go your way until the time of the end. The Kairu Eskatu, or Eskatu Kairu, however you wish to put that. The appointed time of the end. When would that appointed time of the end be? Will it be the 1335th day? Because that's the total countdown of Daniel chapter 12. But when would that resurrection of Daniel chapter 12 be? Verse 7. When the power of the holy people has been completely shattered, all of these things must be fulfilled. Folks, do you catch the power of this? It's not talking about the destruction of the church at the end of the Christian age. The appointed time of the end of the age, the end of all that Daniel foretold would be when the power of the holy people was completely shattered. That meets the challenge of Christ insofar as the timing. So what we have done, and we've been spending a good little bit of time on this, I've been examining the Old Testament passages that predicted that time of the end, the kairos, the divinely appointed time. Now, by the way, in my brand new book, Resurrection Feast Fulfilled, I have an entire study of the significance of the Greek word kairos that's found in the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Hebrew Old Testament. Passage after passage after passage I set forth, which foretold kairos, you see, means divinely appointed time. You got that? So we have the Old Testament predicting the divinely appointed time of the end, the time for the coming of the everlasting world of righteousness, which is the new heaven and new earth. That would be at the end of the 70 weeks of Daniel, Daniel 9, 24 and 27. The coming of the Lord would be at that divinely appointed time, that time of the resurrection. Again, Daniel chapter 12. So we've spent a good bit of time on this concept because 70 weeks were determined to seal, vision, and prophecy. Daniel 9:24. But you see, ladies and gentlemen, to seal, vision, and prophecy meant to fulfill all prophecy and bring the prophetic office to its close. There is a wide consensus of scholarship that agrees with that. That's not just a preterist view. Hope you understand that. All millennialists, postmillennialists, premillennialists, they agree. To seal, vision, and prophecy means to bring the prophetic office to its close through the fulfillment of all prophecy. So, included in Daniel's prophecy, the time of the fulfillment of all things. The time of the fulfillment of all things is the time of the bringing in of everlasting righteousness, which, according to Peter in 2 Peter chapter 3, is the new heaven and new earth wherein dwells righteousness. 2 Peter chapter 3 and verse 13. That's the new heaven and new earth of Revelation 21 and 22. The point being, the kairos, the appointed time of the end, is the time of the fulfillment of all prophecy. The time of the fulfillment of all prophecy is the time of the new heaven and new earth. The time for the fulfillment of all prophecy is the time of the resurrection. Do you know if anybody disagrees with that? I don't. I don't know a single person that disagrees with that. Okay? Well, the time of the resurrection, this is where we've spent our time the last few weeks, is the time when, according to Revelation chapter 10, verse 6 and 7, in the days of the sounding of the seventh trumpet, or when the seventh trumpet is about to sound, the mystery of God, as foretold by the prophets, would be finished, would be consummated, would be brought to its consummation. So the seventh trumpet is the time for the fulfillment of all prophecy. The finishing, the bringing to a consummation, the mystery of God. Okay? Revelation chapter 11, verse 15 and following. In the days of the sounding of the seventh trumpet. You follow that? Seventh trumpet, fulfilling all prophecy, completing the mystery of God. Revelation chapter 11, 15, I'm going to read it one more time. The seventh angel sounded, and there were great voices in heaven saying, the kingdoms of this world have become the kingdom of our God and of his Christ, and he shall reign forever and ever. And the 24 elders, which sat before God, on their seats, fell upon their faces and worship God. I'm still having trouble reading, even after my cataract surgery. You have to bear with me here. Saying, we give thee thanks, O Lord God Almighty, which wert and art and are to come, because you have taken to you your great power and have reigned. By the way, the majority of translations renders that and has begun to reign. Powerful point. I won't develop it. And the nations were angry, and your wrath is come, the time of the dead, that they should be judged, and you should give your reward unto the servants, the prophets, to the saints, to them that feared your name, small and great, and should destroy them which destroy the earth. Okay? One more time. Sounding the seventh trumpet, the time of the fulfillment of all things. Time of the sounding of the trumpet is the time of the resurrection. By the way, we know that also because of 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 52. At the time of the sounding of the last trumpet, what happens? Mortal puts on immortality. Corruption puts on incorruption. And that's the fulfillment of God's Old Covenant promises made to Old Covenant Israel after the flesh. Okay? All prophecy fulfilled and the sounding of the seventh trumpet. Now, in the time I've got left, boy, time goes by so fast. In the time of the sounding of the seventh trumpet, it's the time for the rewarding of the prophets. Well, let's go back then on that theme to Daniel chapter 12. Was Daniel a prophet? Well, I know and I understand because I have a good friend, a scholar in Israel who is a Jew, a tremendous scholar. He said that in the Jewish community, Daniel is not widely considered to be a prophet. Now, I can understand why the Jews would not consider or want to consider Daniel as a prophet. You know why? Well, because Daniel foretold the establishment of the Messianic kingdom in the days of the Fourth Empire. According to the Jews, didn't happen. According to Daniel, chapter 7, in the days of the seventh or fourth empire, which is the Roman Empire, the Ancient of Days would come, destroy the little horn, and establish the kingdom forever and ever, which is, of course, Revelation chapter 11. The Jews don't believe the Lord came in the days of Rome, and he did not establish the kingdom. The Jews know that Daniel chapter 9, especially in the, quote, new 9th century Masoretic text, it was completely perverted to take out any possibility whatsoever of the Messiah. Total distortion. So therefore, since that distorted, perverted version of the Masoretic text does not predict the Messiah, then, hey, Daniel's not a prophet, according to that perverted text. And they know that when the power of the holy people, i.e. Old Covenant Israel, was shattered in AD 70, that was supposed to be the time of, guess what? The kingdom, the righteous shining forth as the firmament. That was supposed to be the resurrection. But again, they know that their physical view of the resurrection didn't occur in the Roman Empire. See? So none of Daniel's prophecies were fulfilled in the days of Rome. Therefore, Daniel's not a prophet. Well, that's tremendously unfortunate. Okay. So John was told, in the sounding of days of the sounding of the seventh trumpet, it would be the time of the rewarding of the prophets. Remember, Daniel chapter 12 foretold the time of the resurrection. Well, let me ask you a question. Is the time of the resurrection the time of the rewarding of the dead? Well, of course it is. Who would deny that? Daniel chapter 12, verse 2, many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall rise, some to everlasting life. Is that the rewarding of the dead? Well, let's see. Revelation chapter 11, verse 18, the time of the dead, that they should be judged, and that you should reward your servants, the prophets and the saints. Yeah, resurrection, the time of the rewarding of the dead. And Daniel chapter 12, verse 13, once again, Daniel was told, Daniel, seal up the vision of this book. By the way, back in verse 10 and 11, he was told, seal up the book because it's far off. It's not near. It's not at hand. It's not coming quickly. It's not coming shortly. Not coming soon. It's far off. Now, that kind of destroys the argument by those who are so adamantly against covenant eschatology when they say, oh, the kingdom is always at hand. The Lord is always at hand. No, it's not. Daniel was told, seal the book because it's not at hand. It's far off. Okay? So Daniel, seal up the vision, seal up the book until the time of the end. At that time, you shall arise to your inheritance. What's his inheritance? Eternal life. There's the rewarding of the prophets. When would that rewarding of the prophets take place, ladies and gentlemen? I've already shared it with you in this video. In Daniel chapter 12, verse 6, one angel asked another, after the prediction of the Great Tribulation, after the prediction of the resurrection, after the prediction of the time of the end, after the prediction of the righteous shining forth in the kingdom, one angel asked another and says, tell us, when shall these things be? When will these things come to pass or be fulfilled? The other angel lifts his left hand, swears by him who lives forever and ever, and says, it shall be for a time, times, and a half time. We're not going to worry about that at the moment. And when the power of the holy people has been completely shattered, all of these things. Look, I have had skeptics, I have had anti-preterists say, well, some of those things will be fulfilled. I debated Dr. David Hester from Faulkner University in Montgomery, Alabama, twice a few years ago. And it appeared that he didn't even know Daniel chapter 12 existed. He tried to escape it by saying, well, most of the stuff was fulfilled, in the first century, maybe AD 70, but not verse 2. Then he denied that Daniel chapter 12 foretold the resurrection at all. And then he changed it back and said, well, yeah, it does predict a resurrection, but it has nothing to do with AD 70. In that debate, ladies and gentlemen, David Hester changed his views, changed his public proclamation and position on Daniel chapter 12 4 different times. When I called him out on it, pointing out his utter self-contradictions, never addressed Daniel again. Now look, I'm out of time for today. But the bottom line is that Daniel chapter 12 foretold the resurrection, the time of the rewarding of the prophets, and that time of the rewarding of the prophets was going to be when the power of the holy people was completely shattered. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you next year.